Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Horror Stories. I know many of you use these episodes to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Story 1. It was one of those nights when the snow seemed endless, covering everything with a white blanket. My shift at the clinic had run late, and the drive back already looked difficult. The road was slippery, and the snowfall created a haze in the glow of the headlights. Even so, I didn't mind. I love my job as a veterinary technician, and the peace of driving alone after a long day was something I usually appreciated. However, that night felt different. There was a strange heaviness in the air, a stillness that wasn't comforting. I thought it was just simple exhaustion. Halfway home, I noticed that the snowbanks on either side of the road were growing higher and higher, narrowing my path. The trees alongside the road stood rigid and motionless, their dark silhouettes blending into the surrounding blackness. I hadn't seen another car in miles, nothing unusual in these rural areas, but even so, it left me with a strange feeling of vulnerability. That was when I heard it. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. A faint baby's cry drifted through the cold. I turned down the volume of the radio to listen better. The crying came again, soft but clear, carried by the wind. I slowed down, looking toward the dark forest on my right. The sound was coming from there. It made no sense. Why would there be a baby out here, in the middle of nowhere, during a snowstorm? I pulled over, hesitating, while the sobs grew clearer. My breath fogged up the windshield as I sat there. Everything in me screamed to stay in the car and keep driving, but another part, maybe the veterinary technician in me, or simply the human part, couldn't ignore it. If there really was a baby out there, it wouldn't survive long in these conditions. I grabbed my phone to use it as a flashlight and stepped out of the car. The cold hit me like a slap, the kind that seeps through every layer of clothing and chills you to the bone. The snow crunched under my boots as I walked toward the edge of the trees, the beam of light cutting through the dense snowfall. "Hello?" I called. "Is anyone there? Do you need help?" The crying continued in the distance. It was coming from deeper in the forest. I stopped and glanced back at my car. The safety of its warm interior felt miles away, but I couldn't turn back anymore. As I moved between the trunks, I felt the trees closing in around me, getting tighter. The crying grew louder, more urgent. I swept the ground and surroundings with the light, expecting to find a stroller or someone in trouble. Instead, I found a small patch of disturbed snow, and in the center, a baby blanket, partially buried under the fresh layer. I crouched down to pick it up. My fingers trembled as I shook off the snow. It was damp and frayed at the edges, the kind of thing that had seen years of use. My stomach tightened. Where was the baby? Then I heard branches breaking behind me. I whipped the flashlight around, illuminating nothing but trees and snow. "Hello," I called again, louder this time. The crying had stopped, replaced by an unsettling silence. A gust of wind shook the branches, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement, something slipping between the trunks. My heart hammered in my chest as I stepped back, clutching the blanket as if it were a shield. I turned toward the direction where I thought my car was, but it was hard to tell which way I had come. The snow was falling more heavily, erasing my tracks. I cursed under my breath puffing out invisible clouds. Another branch snapped, closer this time. "Is someone there?" My voice sounded steadier than I felt, disguising the growing panic. The beam of light danced over the trees, but there was no one, just shadows and snow. Then I heard it again. The crying. This time it wasn't distant. It was coming from behind me. I spun around abruptly, the flashlight shaking as I tried to find the source. Suddenly the crying stopped, leaving behind an almost deafening silence. My body went rigid, even though my mind was screaming at me to run. And then I saw them, footprints in the snow leading away from where I stood. I followed their trail with the light. They seemed to snake between the trees. "Enough, Sa," I muttered to myself. Whatever it was, this was not normal. I started walking back toward where I hoped the car was, sweeping the flashlight from side to side. The snowfall made it hard to see, and every noise, the wind, the crunch of snow under my feet, felt amplified. Then I saw it. Through the veil of flakes, my car appeared amid the snow and the darkness. For a second I felt relief, but it vanished immediately. A shadow crossed the road just at the edge of my headlight's reach. It was fast, almost imperceptible, but it was there. I broke into a run toward the car, clutching the little blanket as if it could protect me. Once inside, I locked the doors and with clumsy hands turned the key. As soon as the engine came to life, I wasted no time getting back on the road. By the time I got home, I was shaking. I set the blanket on the kitchen counter and collapsed onto the couch, trying to make sense of everything. Had it been a cruel prank, some twisted joke, or was it something else? The next morning, I couldn't get it out of my head. That blanket, the sound of the crying haunted me. I decided to call the local sheriff's office. When I explained what had happened, the deputy on the other end of the line went quiet for a moment before asking me to come in. At the station, they listened carefully as I went through every detail. When I mentioned the blanket, one of the officers looked at his partner. Finally, he spoke. "That stretch of road has a history," he said. "We've been getting reports of strange noises and apparitions out there for years. Sometimes it's laughter, sometimes crying. Some people even claim to have seen figures between the trees. We've investigated, but we've never found anything conclusive, and to be honest, most folks prefer not to talk about it." A chill ran through me. "And the blanket?" I asked. "Doesn't that mean someone was there?" "We've found blankets before," he admitted, "but no babies and no people. It's like whoever, or whatever, is leaving them just disappears without a trace." His words stayed with me on the drive home, the afternoon sun doing little to ease the tightness in my chest. That stretch of road, that forest, they weren't normal. Now I knew it. A week later, I had to take the same route after another night shift. The tension in my hands was obvious as I gripped the steering wheel. As I passed the place where I had stopped, I looked toward the tree line, part of me convinced that something or someone was hiding there. The forest was quiet, but as I kept driving, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I don't know what it was that I heard that night, or who or what was there, but I haven't driven that stretch since. And every time I hear a baby crying, I can't help the uneasy chill that runs down my spine. Story 2. Driving delivery routes in Alaska wasn't for the faint of heart, especially in winter, and even more so if you were a woman driver like me. The roads didn't forgive mistakes. The cold could drain the life out of you, and the solitude. Well, you had to be at peace with your own company. That night in 2018, I was in the final stretch of an exhausting shift, the kind where your eyes burn from staring nonstop at endless snow-covered roads. My truck was loaded with packages headed to remote addresses, the kind of areas where people truly appreciate the rare delivery service. The snowstorm started to pick up just as the last light of day faded. The flakes were falling hard, covering the road and erasing the faint tire tracks that had been my only guide. I'd driven that route enough times to know there were still miles to go before the next town, and even more before the last stop on my list. The truck's heater was barely keeping up, and I had a thermos of lukewarm coffee as my only company. About 20 miles from nowhere, the truck's tire slid over a patch of ice. I corrected the wheel, but the rear tires sank into the snowbanks building up at the side of the road. No matter how much I rocked the vehicle or cursed under my breath, it wasn't getting out of there. I was alone, surrounded by miles of empty snowy fields and dense trees. I checked my phone. No signal. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out into the biting cold to assess the situation. The wind cut through all my layers like a knife. When I shone the light on the wheels, it didn't look good. The tires were buried halfway up and there was no traction anywhere. As I was weighing my options, I saw something in the distance. Headlights. A wave of relief washed over me. Maybe it was another driver or a local who could help. The lights grew brighter as the vehicle approached, revealing the familiar silhouette of a snowplow. The machine stopped right behind my truck, amber lights flashing against the swirling snow. A man climbed down, bundled in heavy winter gear, scarf and hat. He waved and trudged toward me. "Looks like you're stuck," he shouted over the wind, his voice muffled by the scarf. "Yeah, I can't get the tires to grab," I replied. "I can help you dig it out," he offered, his breath visible in the frozen air. "But you're going to freeze out here. Why don't you sit in my cab while I work?" Something about his suggestion didn't sit right with me. His tone was too casual, too eager. I shook my head. "I'll be fine out here. I've got a flashlight and plenty of layers." He put his gloved hands on his hips. "Suit yourself, but it's warmer in the cab." "Thanks, but I'll stay with the truck," I said firmly. He held my gaze for a second longer before nodding. "All right, I'll grab a shovel." He went back to the snowplow and started rummaging around in the back, but an uneasiness crept up through me. Something was off. His movements were too slow, like he was stalling. I looked at my truck and thought about locking myself inside, but before I could decide, he came back with the shovel. "Let's see what we can do," he said. I kept the flashlight trained on the tires while he started digging. He worked slowly and his eyes slid over to me more often than seemed normal. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I took a step back, increasing the distance between us. "You know," he said with forced casualness, pausing with the shovel, "not many people drive this road at night. You're lucky I came along." "Yeah, lucky," I answered. He kept digging for another minute before straightening up. "You're going to need more than a shovel to get out of this. Why don't you get in my cab and we'll call a tow truck in town?" "I'd rather stay here," I said, trying to sound neutral but firm. He let the shovel fall to the ground. "Have it your way," he muttered. As I turned back toward my truck, I suddenly felt a tight grip on my arm. My breath caught as he yanked me backward. "You're being stubborn," he said, his voice now low and threatening. "Let me help you." "No," I shouted, twisting with every bit of strength I had. "Let go of me." I gave a sharp pull, adrenaline fueling me. I planted my feet and tore myself free from his hand. I staggered toward the truck, fumbling for the door handle, but he was right behind me. "You're making this harder than it has to be," he growled, lunging for me again. I spun around, grabbed the shovel he'd dropped, and swung it wildly, not caring if I actually hit him or just scared him off. The blade sliced through the air, missing him by inches, but it was enough to make him back off. He fixed his eyes on me. The friendly mask was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Fine," he spat. "Good luck out here." He stomped back to the snowplow and climbed into the cab. I watched as he reversed. For a moment, the roar of the engine drowned out the wind, and I thought he was leaving. But instead of driving away, he maneuvered the plow to block my truck. "What are you doing?" I screamed, adrenaline surging. The deafening rumble of the engine and the spinning amber lights flooded me with panic. I reached the driver's door, yanked it open, and dove inside, slamming the locks down. The snowplow didn't move, but the man climbed down again, this time without the shovel. He walked toward my truck with a different posture, nothing friendly about it. He pounded on the window with his gloved hand, leaving smudges on the glass. "Open up," he said, his voice muffled but clear. "You're not going anywhere without my help." I didn't answer. My hands were shaking as I checked my phone again. Still no signal. He knocked again, harder this time. "I'm trying to help you," he insisted. I grabbed the flashlight from the passenger seat and shined it directly in his face. He flinched, stepping back with a muffled curse I couldn't make out. Then he turned toward the snowplow and climbed back into the cab. For a second I thought he'd given up, but then he moved the plow forward a few inches, the blade scraping the snow and pushing it closer to my truck. He wasn't just blocking me now, he was boxing me in. I couldn't stay inside. The engine was running, but if he decided to break a window or force the door, I'd be a sitting target. I grabbed the flashlight and a small multi-tool knife from the glove compartment, my breath ragged as I steeled myself. I opened the passenger door as quietly as I could and slipped out, dropping into the snow. The wind swallowed any sound I made as I crept toward the tree line. As soon as I reached the edge of the forest, I ran. The snow was deep. Every step was a struggle, but I kept going. I didn't dare look back. The drone of the snowplow's engine was a constant reminder that I still wasn't safe. The flashlight beam shook with my unsteady hands. I stumbled over roots and buried rocks, the cold biting my face and fingers. Then I heard it, the crunch of footsteps behind me. He was following. I turned off the flashlight and crouched down, my heart pounding in my ears. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I pressed myself against a tree, trying to control my breathing. The steps stopped, and then I heard him shout, "You can't hide out here forever. You'll freeze before you get anywhere." His voice sent a shiver straight down my spine. I stayed completely still, silently begging that he wouldn't find me. The minutes felt like hours as I listened for any sign of movement. Finally, mercifully, the footsteps faded and the snowplow engine roared to life again. I didn't wait to see if he'd really left. I kept moving, guided only by the faint glow of the moon. Every stride through the thick drifts seemed to drain what little energy I had left. My breath came out in clouds and my legs burned, but I pushed on. That's when I remembered something. A delivery I had made months earlier to an old cabin hidden in that forest. It was small and weathered, but its owner, a quiet man in his 60s, had seemed kind. It wasn't close, but it was my only chance. I adjusted my course and started heading in the direction where I thought the cabin might be, praying I could find it in the darkness. The forest felt endless, with the ghostly stillness of the winter night as my only backdrop. After what felt like hours, I spotted a faint flickering light in the distance. It gave me just enough strength to pick up my pace. As I drew closer, the familiar shape of the cabin came into view. I stumbled toward it, my legs on the brink of giving out. I pounded on the wooden door with my fist. "Hello, please, I need help." My voice was hoarse from the cold and panic. After a moment, the door creaked open and the owner appeared. It was the same man I delivered to before, his lined face wrinkled with concern. "What on earth?" "Come in quickly," he said, ushering me inside. The warmth of the cabin hit me like a wave, and I nearly collapsed onto the worn-out couch by the fire. I tried to explain everything, the words tumbling out in a frantic rush, that there was a man, a snowplow driver who had grabbed me, that I ran, that I didn't know where else to go. The man listened without interrupting and, without hesitation, picked up the phone from the counter and called the police. While we waited, he gave me a blanket and a cup of hot tea. My hands trembled so much that I spilled some, but I didn't care. The heat was slowly calming me. Even so, I couldn't stop thinking, what if he came looking for me at the cabin? The police arrived about an hour later, their flashing lights cutting through the total darkness outside. I rushed to the door as they stepped out of the car, a wave of relief hitting me at the sight of their uniforms. I told the whole story again, this time trying to stay composed. They took notes, asked questions. Then one of them said, "We're going to take you back to your truck. We'll check it out and make sure we can get you out of here safely." The idea of going back made my stomach twist, but I knew I didn't have a choice. When we arrived, my truck was exactly where I'd left it, half buried in the snow and still blocked by a wall of snow piled up where the man had tried to trap me. The officers' flashlights swept over the area as they climbed out. One inspected the truck while the other searched the forest around us. "There's no sign of him," one of them said after a tense few minutes. "But we'll keep an eye out. Let's get you unstuck." My hands were shaking on the steering wheel when, at last, the truck jolted free. Relief washed over me as the officer gave me a thumbs up, signaling that I could move forward. "We'll escort you to the main road," he said, "just to make sure you get there safely." That short stretch felt endless, but having the red and blue lights behind me was the comfort I desperately needed. When we finally reached the highway, they pulled up alongside me and one of them rolled down his window. "You'll be all right now," he assured me. "If anything else happens, don't hesitate to call." My voice cracked as I thanked them. To this day, I don't know who that man was or what he really intended, but I will never forget the look in his eyes when his friendly facade fell apart. I won't forget how he blocked my truck, how he grabbed my arm, and I won't forget the desperation I felt running through that forest, wondering if I'd make it out alive. Now every time I drive those remote roads, I keep a flashlight within reach, a portable phone charger on hand, and pepper spray where I can grab it fast. I learned not to blindly trust the kindness of strangers, because sometimes the ones offering help are exactly the people you should fear the most. Story 3. Photography has been my hobby ever since I got my first camera at 12. It's a way of life that combines my love for adventure and solitude. That's why when I booked a remote cabin near Bar Harbor, Maine, during a winter storm, I didn't feel discouraged. In fact, the idea of capturing wildlife against a backdrop of freshly fallen snow was exactly the kind of challenge I craved. The cabin was everything I'd hoped for. Small, rustic, and tucked deep in the woods. There was no Wi-Fi, no cell signal, and the nearest neighbor was at least a mile away. It was perfect. The caretaker had left a pile of firewood by the door, and a note reminding me to keep the generator running during the storm. The place had its charm: creaky wooden floors, a stone fireplace, and windows that opened onto an endless sea of snow-covered trees. I spent the first day exploring the area and taking some preliminary photos. The storm was already rolling in, with heavy flakes falling from a sky that felt like it was pressing down on the world. By the time night fell, the wind had picked up, howling through the trees as if it were alive. I settled into the cabin with a cup of coffee, reviewing the shots I'd taken. The fire crackled in the fireplace, and for a moment, I felt a deep sense of peace. That was when the sound reached me, the clear, unmistakable crunch of footsteps on the snow. I didn't move. I focused on the noise. It came again right outside. My first thought was that it could be a deer, maybe a fox, but there was something about the rhythm that didn't fit. It was too human. I grabbed the flashlight, walked to the window, and looked outside. The snow was falling hard and the wind was whipping the trees, but I couldn't see anything. The footsteps stopped and all I could hear was the storm. I told myself it was nothing and went back to my seat, though my nerves were on edge. The wind rattled the windows and I tried to concentrate on editing photos, but my attention kept drifting back to the big window. An hour passed before I heard the sound again, this time louder. It seemed closer, as if it were circling the cabin. My chest tightened as I picked up the flashlight and headed for the door. I opened it carefully and stepped out onto the porch. The cold hit me immediately, sharp and merciless. "Hello?" I called into the darkness, my voice swallowed by the wind. The flashlight beam swept across the snow, revealing only a pristine, untouched surface. No footprints, no tracks. I went back inside and secured the door. My mind began running through possibilities. An animal, the wind, even my imagination. But none of the explanations convinced me. The storm was at its peak, the wind howling like a wounded beast. I added more wood to the fire, hoping the flames would chase away the creeping unease climbing up my spine. That night, sleep was hard to find. The groans of the cabin and the wails of the wind fed my anxiety. At some point, I must have drifted off, because I woke up suddenly to a heavy sound on the roof. I shot upright, my heart pounding. The noise came again, deliberate and rhythmic, as if someone or something were walking above me. I grabbed the flashlight and the fireplace poker, trying to muster some courage as I approached the window. The storm had calmed a bit, and moonlight filtered through the clouds, bathing the landscape in a soft glow. But the roof was out of my line of sight, and I couldn't see anything unusual. The thudding stopped abruptly, and a dense, unsettling silence settled over everything. The next morning, I went out to investigate. The snow was deep, but the storm had left behind a strange stillness. That's when I saw the footprints. They started at the tree line, led to the cabin, circled it, and disappeared back into the woods. They were human, unmistakably so, but barefoot. My stomach turned as I followed their path, stopping when I discovered something carved into the snow near the back of the cabin. An unfamiliar, intricate symbol, etched with precision into the frozen surface. I stared at it, a cold dread sliding down my spine. Who had made that? And why? I spent the day inside, plagued by the feeling of being watched. Every time I looked out the window, I expected to see someone standing at the tree line, but the forest remained mute and the snow untouched. That night I heard the footsteps again. This time they sounded heavier, each step sending a shiver through me. They circled the cabin over and over, stopping near the windows, as if whoever was out there were trying to look inside. I didn't dare move. I barely breathed, listening to the crunch of boots sinking into the snow. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped and a loud knock echoed on the door. My heart leapt into my throat as I gripped the poker tightly. The banging came again, more insistent. "Who's there?" I shouted, trying to sound imposing. There was no answer, just the wind and the rough sound of my own breathing. The knocking stopped, and for a moment I thought it was over, but then I heard the faintest whisper, so soft it could have been the wind, right on the other side of the door. I didn't wait to hear more. I locked myself in the bedroom and pushed a dresser against the door, just in case. The next morning, the footprints were gone, erased by fresh snowfall during the night. But the symbol near the back of the cabin had been redrawn, larger and more detailed than before. I packed my things and left without looking back, the unease clinging to my skin like a second layer. The caretaker of the cabin dismissed my story as paranoia brought on by isolation, but I know what I heard, what I saw. Even now, I can't look at the photos from that trip without feeling a chill. Some places we go to in search of solitude have their own rules, their own inhabitants, and sometimes those inhabitants don't want to be disturbed. Story 4. As a marketing professional, working alone is the norm, but changing environments now and then keeps me sane. That's why I rented a remote cabin near Lake Placid for a week. The idea was to escape the city, focus on a new project, and along the way, enjoy the serene beauty of winter. The cabin was perfect, small, cozy, and hidden among the trees, with nothing but snow and forest in every direction. It was exactly what I needed. During the first 2 days, nothing noteworthy happened. The storm was already rolling in when I arrived, and by the second night, the snow was falling steadily. I didn't mind being cut off. I had stocked up on supplies, the generator was humming along just fine, and I had a stack of books to read whenever I needed a break from work. The crackle of the fireplace and the muffled silence of the woods were exactly what I had been craving. By the third afternoon, the storm had turned fierce. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and piling snow high against the cabin walls. I was working on my laptop at the kitchen table when I heard frantic knocking at the door. My stomach knotted as I stood up. The comforting stillness of the cabin suddenly became unsettling. "Who is it?" I asked. "Please, my car broke down," a man shouted from outside, his voice muffled by the wind. "I need help." I hesitated, glancing at the heavy flashlight on the counter. The storm was brutal, and if his car really had broken down, he wouldn't last long out there. Even so, there was something about the situation that didn't sit right with me. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the cabin was extremely remote. I cracked the door open. The icy wind hit me full on as I looked outside. The man was hunched against the cold, wearing a thick parka and clutching his arms to his chest. A scarf covered part of his face, but his eyes looked wide with urgency. "Please," he repeated, his voice trembling. "I just need to warm up." Even though I had a bad feeling, I stepped back and let him in. A gust of snow came in with him, dusting the wooden floor before I could slam the door shut. "Thank you," he panted, pulling off his scarf and hat. His face was gaunt and his skin pale from the cold. He looked harmless, but my distrust didn't go away. "Where's your car?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "A little further up," he said, rubbing his hands together. "It slid into a ditch and I couldn't get it out." I nodded, though his answer didn't explain why he'd been walking so far from the main road. Even so, I offered him a blanket and a cup of coffee. He settled in near the fire, thawing out, while I watched him carefully from the kitchen. Over the next hour, we made awkward small talk. He said his name was Travis and claimed he was on his way to visit family in a nearby town. But there was something off about his story. He avoided eye contact. His answers were vague, and whenever I asked about the car, he changed the subject. Outside, the storm was raging, and I couldn't just throw him back out into the cold. However, the longer he stayed, the more my uneasiness grew. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that the isolation and the storm were playing tricks on my mind. Even so, I slid the lock on my bedroom door when I went to bed that night, the wind masking any sounds inside the old cabin. I slept poorly. Every sound seemed amplified, the boards settling, the wind whistling through the cracks, even the faint rustle of Travis moving in the other room. At some point I thought I heard him wandering around, but I convinced myself it was my imagination. The next morning the storm had eased and left a fresh blanket of snow over everything. I found Travis in the kitchen, sipping coffee as if the place were his. He didn't seem in any hurry to leave, which only fueled my suspicions. "You said your car is right there on the road," I reminded him. He nodded, his gaze flicking toward the window. "Yeah, but with all this snow, I don't know if I can get it out today." I put on my coat and boots. "I'll help you take a look." The color drained from his face. For a moment he seemed about to refuse, but then he forced a smile and said, "Sure, thanks." We trudged through the snow, the cold biting at my face. I didn't know exactly what I expected to find, but when we reached the road, my heart sank. There were no tire tracks, no sign of a car, just an untouched expanse of snow, smooth and even in both directions. "Are you sure it's here?" I asked. Travis froze, his eyes scanning the empty road. "Maybe it's a little further down," he muttered. I didn't believe him. My heart was pounding as I headed back toward the cabin, my mind racing through the worst-case scenarios. Who was this guy? Why was he really here? Back inside, I grabbed my phone and pretended to look for a signal. "I'll call a tow truck," I said, just to see how he'd react. He tensed, the smile dropped from his face. "That's not necessary," he replied immediately. "I'll deal with it once the snow melts." In that instant, I knew I couldn't trust him. The rest of the day, I kept my distance, my nerves fraying more with every passing hour. Travis alternated between trying to make conversation and staring out the window. That night, once again, I locked the bedroom door from the inside. Sleeping was impossible. Around midnight, I heard the faint creak of floorboards, followed by the soft click of a door opening. My pulse quickened. I strained to listen. Then came footsteps moving through the cabin. I held my breath. They stopped right outside my door, and, for a moment, the only things I could hear were the wind and the flickering of firelight seeping under the threshold. "Travis," I whispered, barely audible. There was no response, just silence. It was as if he were testing my limits. I moved closer to the door and pressed my ear against it. For a moment, all I heard was the storm and the crackling of the dying fire, until a low, guttural whisper emerged from the other side. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone froze my blood. I stepped back, my legs shaking. "Get out," I shouted. "I called the police. They're on their way." Silence. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and not the slightest sound returned. The fire went out, plunging the cabin into darkness. I stayed there, shivering, waiting for the first light of dawn. When morning finally came, I opened the door cautiously. The living room was empty. The air felt thick with a strange stillness. The blanket Travis had used was gone, and so was the mug he'd been drinking from. Mustering my courage, I stepped outside. The storm had passed, and the landscape was a blank page. There was no sign of tire tracks, just a single line of footprints leading away from the front door. I went back inside and rekindled the fire, but I couldn't get any work done all day. I just sat on the couch staring into the flames. I don't know what became of Travis, or if that was even his real name. But I'm certain of one thing. Even if his intentions were bad, I did what I believed was right. Leaving someone to fend for themselves in the middle of a snowstorm wasn't an option. If these winter chills sent shivers down your spine, don't leave them frozen in the shadows. Hit like and share them with your friends who love a good scare. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss another spine-tingling story. Do you have your own chilling tale? Send it to me. I'd love to feature it. Stay safe, stay warm, and remember, Not everything hiding in the snow is as innocent as it seems. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.